Hello, today is July something, 24th, and I'm thinking about space today. Uh, I'm going to go through what I've been thinking about today, which is the illusion, delusion, and conclusion of space. So let's get into it. I am just on my way home right now. I'm just about to pull out of my parking space. And the car was actually one of the spaces that I spent a lot of time in over the last, not the last couple of years, but like in my previous job for about 6 solid years. I was driving across the city, going to my work, which was, about half an hour away, but in the traffic in the city, usually it took at least 1 hour to to get anywhere, which was fun, right? It's a lot of time, but what it did afford me was the space in this car, like this kind of isolated space, to be just with myself, I suppose. This is the oh, how come the thing changed? This is kind of the space that I spent a lot of time in, almost like 2 hours every single day, just kind of with myself, by myself. And one of the things that it makes me think of is the illusion of space. Like having this space, what it kind of creates is like that idea that I'm kind of isolated in my own place. I don't necessarily need to be doing anything, or I'm like pretty isolated from myself and or from other people, and just kind of living out almost like whatever I wanted to do in this moment. So some of the things that I did with that time was to do a lot of listen to a lot of podcasts. I probably listened to a whole number of podcasts from start to finish. I think about how did this get made. Probably listened to 200-300 episodes of that. The Mike Mandel Hypnosis podcast. I listened to that after I took my hypnosis training, and kind of went from front to back, listened to everything up until the time to that present moment, and that was almost 200 episodes. I also did a lot of audiobooks, listening to audiobooks, learning about different things, as well as like a couple great courses, which was really interesting, learning, getting a little bit more in depth into an understanding of time and quantum hypnosis and all of those things. So I'm by no means any kind of expert, but I have listened a little bit and thought about some of those things. So then, what does that have to do with space? So a lot of times, like I guess space is this notion that it's something that we need to kind of like decompress and spread out, and I think that's important. But it's when I think of the first thing that comes to mind in terms of space is physical space. It's what our what we see, what we experience. It's kind of the environment that we live in, and because of that, it's probably one of the first things that um, we associate with the idea of space. We can see space, like in this car, there's a physical space. It's blocked off by these windows and like the tops, the bottoms, the chairs, all of the physical stuff kind of enclosing this space, and it makes it feel private, right? It makes it feel like I have this space to my own. Um, but then knowing that there's other things in the space, for example, so there's other particles, there's air, there's dust, there's like, water droplets and things like that, things that can't be seen with the naked eye, and that kind of fills the space. So it's like the space isn't actually empty, it's just filled with things that we can't see. So it's like in that separation, like what separates the space? What makes this space different from the one outside? And it's just an artificial creation, because like that illusion that we have space is kind of like metaphorically aligned through like the idea of like a physical manifestation of space. But then it's also, if you think about like mental space and mental capacity, you could be in the most spacious physical environment, but full of thoughts up in your head. And then the illusion of having no space appears. And that's kind of what happens, or that's a good way of thinking about what a distortion is. A distortion is almost like a negative illusion, right? Because if what we perceive is created, it's perceived in our minds, it's like a hallucination or an illusion of like the reality that we're witnessing. And when we look at that in some way that is like negative to us, so like maybe I'm overwhelmed, I'm stressed out, I have too many thoughts going on in my head, it's like not quote unquote real in the regular sense of that word, but at the same time we say that we now lack that space. So then like what changes between that idea of like having space and then not having like space or like mental capacity? It's kind of like a distortion because it distorts the actual like layout of your internal environment. If you think that because you have a couple thoughts that are rolling in your head and that keep coming out, that you've suddenly lost all the space and mental capacity, in some ways it's true, because then your focus is taken up. Like it's almost like if you're too close up to something, then you can't see past it, and it seems like that thing, like if you're standing right up next to a wall, it seems like the wall is endless, that there's no beginning, that there's no end. But if you take some steps back, or if you get a higher vantage point or something like that, then it begins to shift what that space looks like. In the mental sense of it, like that, that space is always there. You can always kind of let go and put down things. Had an interesting conversation today around with some of my students about meditation, actually. So meditation is one of those non-pharmacological interventions in like that's recommended for different mental health conditions. So the idea of like meditation is probably not very well understood. There's a general conception of what that means, but is it like, if I were to ask you like what is meditation, could you define it and could you explain it, why it would be useful for somebody? So the way that I think about meditation, and actually what was interesting is when I ask, usually I'll ask like, oh, what is meditation to you? So I'll ask you that question before I answer. And it's like, what is meditation to you? How would you describe it? And one of the descriptions I got was, it's kind of like to be present and then to push away your reality, right? To push away reality in the efforts of making space. And I thought that was really interesting because in my mind, I actually think of it the opposite way, which is to say that making, in meditation, you're actually observing your reality more closely, which I would qualify with the idea that this moment that you're experiencing right now is the only one that exists. So if it's the only thing that exists and you're observing it more, like in meditation, whether you're focusing on your breath, whether you're focusing on your like a mantra or something like that, or various other ways of getting into a meditative state. It's interesting to think that in some ways it's like pushing away reality, which then kind of points to that idea that we think about like our mental landscape as our reality, which said another way is an acknowledgement that we create our own realities in our mind. And that if you change your mind, then you change your reality. So then that idea of like pushing away reality, I think is opposite to how I would think about meditation, where it's more about observing your reality, because in your present, this moment that is the only one that ever exists, when you can observe that, then you become more present and you can begin to notice various different things and notice the amount of space, the quality of the space even that you have access to. The idea that like often the thing that people get stuck on with meditation is the ability to kind of leave your thoughts behind. And in some ways, I don't believe the way that I approach meditation is not that you leave thoughts behind. Rather, you observe them and let them go. You acknowledge them and let them pass. You just simply stop following them. So if you're sitting and kind kind of making space for yourself to meditate, then you could notice a thought about something. For example, let's say, oh, laundry, I have to do laundry. So then that is a actual like manifestation of your experience in that current moment. You're noticing that you're thinking about laundry. And that's part of the illusion you're experiencing in the moment, and you can acknowledge that. What happens where it becomes a distortion is when you begin to follow that, because then you begin to create either like a mental story about what's going to happen next, or thinking about all the things that you potentially have to do. So like, oh, I got to do laundry and it's like this, and I haven't done it for this many weeks, and there's going to be so much. And then, oh, then you start thinking about all of the other errands that you might have to do. And it becomes this whole kind of like distortion. You get a whole new illusion. That is created, and then it distorts from like your current reality, which is this idea that you're going to sit and meditate, right? So I think that it's interesting to consider how we have that control over our space. And it makes me then think of this idea of doing too much. Like doing too much, that term doing can also be assigned to like the way that we engage with thinking. If we engage with thinking in a way that kind of is overwhelming and puts us at capacity because maybe we have anxious thoughts about going, like things that are coming up, maybe you have deadlines for students, it's like exams and studying and assignments and things like that. All of that stuff is very real. Like for myself, even after finishing my MBA, the amount of space and that I've kind of rediscovered is pretty wild, in the sense that it's like I was spending so much time and energy, like it was a lot of work. And now that it's over and that space has kind of been reclaimed, it's very freeing, you know? So it's your experience and the feelings that you're having in the moment are absolutely valid. They're so real in the moment, where you're having an experience of like school and deadlines and all of these things, and they kind of like fit and take up space in your mind. At the same time, knowing that even while all of that is going on, you can still have space. And this leads me to my conclusion of space, which is that space is infinite. Space is infinite if we choose to view it that way. And I think it's something that you might consider of like, where are the limits that you are putting on your space, right? So is it that you don't have any physical space? Like, I mean, you might be living in tight quarters with like many people around, and where do you find space for that? Well, like if you were to sit with yourself right now, wherever you are, and close your eyes or have them open and consider the amount of like where the limit, where you end and something else begins. Like if you close your eyes and imagine, you might think of like your physical kind of body, for example, right? And that's like where you physically end, but then your thoughts can range wide. Like you could imagine like taking yourself into like different spaces, maybe like take yourself back to that trip that you had last year, where you had this like amazing experience, and you can revivify that experience and really feel like you're there again. That's like it's like time travel. It's like finding extra space in a space in your current reality. And like having that idea of space being infinite becomes really interesting to then, if you work or engage with your world as if space is infinite, then it changes how you engage with space with other people even. So like your own particular space. But then like when you look at other people, you can then allow others to also take up space. And I speak with that from my current experience where, you know, oftentimes it's about like shouting and who speaks up the loudest and makes the most noise to get that attention. And the idea is that attention is limited. Well, that's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that attention is unlimited. There's like so many things that we can pay attention to that it's endless. And attention isn't tied to time, for example. I think about like artists who have who become famous after their death, right? They live their whole life, they do all these paintings, and nobody like thinks about it or cares about it until after they've left this physical plane. So that kind of appreciation for their art now has become endless because it's kind of living on past them. It's a interesting kind of concept to think about. And then it's, if you can look at space as infinite, it's not finite, then there's no need to own anything because you can never own it all. You can never take up all the space. And nobody can then take up all the space unless you allow them. And this kind of speaks to corporate work environments where the idea is that there's only limited space. And sure, there might be only certain positions, there might be only certain things within within a company, for example. But that just simply is a limitation of space in a company because a company is a physical limitation, right? Like it's something that's created by people. And practically speaking, like if the company really wanted to, they can make a new position for you. They can find different ways of making it work if they find value there. But a lot of times those positions and titles and promotions and things like that are held as kind of like rewards for doing certain things. And sometimes they're not even promised. So I think if you pause for a moment and just realize that we can all share this space with each other, right? We can all share space with each other. How would that change how you interact with others? If you realize that, the space that you recognize is something that you create. You create your own boundaries, you create your own limitations. So that thing is for you to define. That's your illusion. When you have something that affects how you perceive your space and that you start to kind of move away from controlling and creating your own space into having it created and defined for you, that begins to move into the territory of distortion. How is your experience of space being distorted by the things that you're experiencing and encountering? And then the final conclusion there that you might come to, and this is the choice that you can make. You can choose to conclude that space is limited, that everything is finite, and that scarcity is the way to go. So then you can be led by a life of fear and make decisions from that place. Or you can look at the other way of thinking about it, which is to think that space is infinite and that there's more than enough to go around and that it can be shared equally among us. Like we can all have the space that we need to take up. Said another way is there's no reason to put other people down to lift yourself up, right? There was a post on Instagram that said, you don't need to blow out someone else's candle to shine brighter, something like that. Like, and it makes sense. Like if you blow out another candle, it doesn't mean that you yourself will shine brighter. It just means that there's one less candle that's burning. So overall, you've dimmed the collective light. And where does this all tie into Heisenberg and how I'm feeling? I don't know. It's just kind of like a nice little reflective space. I think that these different perspectives really challenge the way that I think and engage in the world. And I think having a better, a more useful awareness improves the model that I interact with the world in. And if it's useful, then it's something that I can continue on with, right? Like, again, it ties back to that idea of utility. You know, you can measure something as much as you want. You can point to like evidence and research and everything about saying um, how wonderful something is, how well it works, uh, until it becomes real for you as a study of one, an N of one study. Until it becomes reality for you, then it's not real for you, right? It doesn't affect you that way. And we end up having a lot of this, we end up having a lot of correlation, uh, kind of bleeding into causation, right? We think that because two things are happening kind of like concurrently or simultaneously, that one leads to another. But a lot of times it speaks to how we construct the illusion of our space and our reality. Um, I'll just end off because I was thinking about this example and I had shared it with my students earlier about how different people can have the same experience and different perspectives. And it's really interesting when you hear two sides of the same story. If you've never done this or have not observed the kind of the way that stories can be so two-sided. We see a lot of these examples in like media. Like some of those medias are really fun, right? Like where you have like one person tell the story and then you have other details filled in and then it changes how you then as the viewer perceive the story. Like this is just a feature of our reality because we're sharing our reality. We have multiple different perspectives all of the time, and those experiences of perspectives from other people are materially real to them. Uh, and at the same time, we are, as outside observers, not having that experience, we are ignorant to them until they are shared with us. And then even then, we don't own that experience. We're just sharing that experience and then interpreting it from our own lens. So from that idea that is infinite, think about your personal internal world right now in this moment. And then consider how the person next to you is also having that experience, this infinite experience. And multiply that by the number of people on Earth in this world, and the number is almost unfathomable to think about how much space there is to have all of these wonderful thoughts rolling around everywhere all the time. I guess ultimately what this means is, like, for me, one of the things that I guess I kind of paused at was like, should I be uploading these videos daily? Like, what if I'm taking up space? And if I think about like that idea of infinite space, then what's stopping me? What's stopping me putting something out there? Um, and why is it giving me pause? So like having that realization, then I can just acknowledge that I had that thought and then kind of move past it, right? And just continue to upload these things, regardless of who's watching them, because this is my space. And because you're watching it and we're sharing it, then welcome and thank you. I'll see you tomorrow.